The Denver Broncos may have built the best defense in the NFL through NFL free agency, but what about through the 2025 NFL draft? Maybe they could get Bo Nix, the best young running back duo in the league. We've got a brand new mock draft and some interesting scenarios for you to ponder on today's episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Free agency, for the most part, Broncos Country is in the past. So we have, maybe some minor additions to be made here and there between now and the NFL draft. But the Denver Broncos have already spent a bunch of money, and we'll see what the future holds as far as more additions to this team. But now that free agency's kind of gotten going, we've kind of let that settle a little bit. We're ready for the main course, which is the 2025 NFL draft. We've got a brand new mock draft for you on today's episode, Locked on Broncos. I'm going to talk about kind of an interesting potential first round scenario direction for the Denver Broncos to go that I didn't even think I could convince myself about. We're going to talk about maybe the best possible tight end to pair up with Evan Engram in this year's draft class, as well as what I believe to be the ideal scenario in terms of adding a new running back duo to this Denver Broncos roster offensively. Welcome into the show today. My name is Sayre Bedinger, co-host of the Locked on Broncos podcast, typically alongside Cody Roark. He'll be back with us for tomorrow's episode of the show. And Broncos Country, shout out to you. Mile high salute for all of you everyday listeners, especially those of you that make us your first listen of the day. We really appreciate you for doing so. And today's episode, Locked on Broncos, is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Broncos Country, let's get right into this. It's mock draft time, okay? Because free agency, the Broncos have made their big moves. They signed Talanoa Hufanga. They signed, obviously, Dre Greenlaw at the linebacker position. You go and get Evan Engram to play the Joker role. And now it's time for some mock draft action, right? Because if the Broncos aren't going to be making a ton more big splashes in free agency, and that appears to be potentially the case, although there's likely to be more moves made between now and the NFL draft, maybe the biggest contributors that are going to come aboard this team now that free agency is in the rear view are guys through the NFL draft. And the Broncos have, for the first time in years, all of their top 4 picks in the 2025 NFL draft. They have picks in the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and then they have 3 selections in round 6 on day 3. Be interesting to see if they maybe try to swing a trade with one of those picks. You never know when a pick swap is going to come into play. Remember last year in the draft, the Broncos actually traded for John Franklin Myers, doing a future pick swap. So we'll see what the future holds there. But I recently did a full 7-round Broncos mock draft, I guess 6 rounds for the Broncos as of right now, over there at predominantlyorange.com. And one scenario that I just can't get out of my head that I would love to talk about on today's episode is what I believe to be building the ideal running back duo for this Denver Broncos team. And it's a couple of Ohio State running backs. I've mentioned this on previous shows, but if you haven't heard me talk about it, the duo of TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins out there at Ohio State, those 2 guys, they've already worked together in the past. It's a beautiful thing. You bring these 2 guys potentially to the NFL if the Broncos can pull this off. Bring these 2 guys to the NFL together and allow them to absolutely eat in Sean Payton's offense. You think back to some of Sean Payton's best offenses, right? In his time with New Orleans, he's always had multiple backs, whether it was, Mark Ingram, Reggie Bush, Darren Sproles, Alvin Kamara, and mixing and matching guys through the years. Pierre Thomas is one for the really, maybe it's more so of the older millennials like myself in listening to the show today. But Sean has always had big time running backs, and he plays them in duos. And when you think about Mark Ingram, Reggie Bush, Alvin Kamara, Pierre Thomas, all these they've got different skill sets, right? Not everybody's going to be a joker like Reggie Bush and Darren Sproles were and Alvin Kamara, but you have to have this duality at the position because you need guys that can wear defenses down, and then you need players at running back that can be on the field for all 3 downs and present a threat to the opposing team. Now, That doesn't mean that your running back always has to be the joker, right? Because we know Evan Engram, he's going to be taking that mantle upon himself for 2025, and he's going to be playing that role. But, I was telling Cody the other day, there's always two jokers in a deck, right? When you get a deck of cards, there's always two jokers in the deck. So with my first round pick for the Denver Broncos, this might feel like a hot take because the mock draft machines do not have this guy going this high. I'm taking TreVeyon Henderson at pick number 20 overall. And that seems like maybe a big stretch because a lot of times in mock drafts, you see TreVeyon Henderson, he's typically sitting around in the second round, things like that. He's not always flying off the board. But I do believe that when the dust all settles ahead of this NFL draft, I do believe that he's one of those guys that NFL teams are going to look at and say, this is probably a top 25 overall player in this class. And as we know, it only takes one team, right? It only takes one team to pick a guy. And I'm not saying the Broncos will be the only team that has TreVeyon Henderson as a top 20 player. And the ideal scenario might be to trade down and still get him. But remember last year, it was the ideal scenario to trade down and still get Bo Nix. And Sean Payton was worried that he was going to get jumped for Bo Nix. So it's much smarter if you have a guy that you like or a guy that you love in the NFL draft. Just take him. Just take the guy, right? And so with my first round pick, I'm taking TreVeyon Henderson and filling the biggest remaining need on this Denver Broncos roster. And I feel like TreVeyon Henderson, he does everything well. And one of the things I love most about him, other than the fact that he played in big games already at Ohio State, is the fact that he played in those big games from the moment that he got on campus. And he was dominating in big games at the age of 18. Like, you go back to his true freshman season, this guy has looked like a pro for a really long time. And I do think that that's going to carry weight with teams because we know that they're not just scouting 2024. They're scouting every year for these guys, especially now with NIL involved. Broncos general manager George Payton has talked about the fact that, hey, we gotta look at what guys still really love the game, that they're getting paid at the college level. That's a big deal. And it's a big part of the evaluation for all of these different players is to say, all right, who are the guys who have been the most consistent in terms of building their craft and being basically pros at the college level. TreVeyon Henderson, to me, is one of those guys who does absolutely that. He's explosive. He's got home run ability. He can break tackles. He can catch passes. He'll stick his nose in there in pass protection. Love the idea of adding him to the Denver Broncos, but fast forward to my third round pick for this mock draft because I want to talk about the second round pick in segment 2. Fast forward to the third round. Could the Denver Broncos pull off something similar to what they did in 2022 when they went back-to-back picks with Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler atop that 2020 class? Could the Broncos in 2025 go after both TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins? Judkins was my third round pick in the mock draft that I did. Now, yes, I use a simulator, and you never know how accurate those things are going to be, but Judkins being there in the third round, that might feel like a bit of a stretch right now, especially where the Broncos are picking kind of later now in the round, which is nice to a degree, but to get the good players, you might have to bump yourself up there a little bit. I love the idea of picking a player like Quinshon Judkins in round 3, who gives you that variance that you need at running back. And you might be wondering, well, what about Jaleel McLaughlin? What about Audric Estime? What about Tyler Bidet and Blake Watson? I don't necessarily think that those guys are all going to be locks to make the roster this coming year. And we know Sean Payton has his guys. We know that the Broncos loved Audric Estime in last year's draft. He shouldn't just throw in the towel on every single one of those guys. But in a running back class like this, in the 2025 NFL draft, you have to be absolutely certain that if you are passing on a guy, that you feel good about the players that you have beside him. And so I just feel like the Broncos would be doing – it would be very similar to, a couple of years ago in the 2023 class, the tight ends were really good. In previous years, wide receivers have been really good. You don't just always want to take just one guy when a class is this deep. you don't need to necessarily always hedge your bets with your highest draft selections. But at the same time, I do feel like this is a perfect draft, the ideal draft to take two backs. And if the Broncos can come away from the 2025 NFL draft with the two Ohio State backs, Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, that's going to be a huge win for this team, because those two guys, like I said, they've already played together. They can play all three downs. They've got speed. They're super athletic, super explosive. And I think both of those guys are going to do really, really well in the NFL. So that's two of my top three picks here in this Denver Broncos mock draft. But in round two, we went a bit of a different direction. We went with the tight end position. And I believe that LSU tight end Mason Taylor might be the perfect tight end to pair up with Evan Engram in Denver for the foreseeable future. We're going to talk about that and much more coming up on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check into your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between eating out, online shopping, entertainment, I know it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Monarch Money is your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app, right? It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending in one place. So you stop managing your money and start building wealth. And there's a couple of different things that I think really are effective with Monarch Money. You get different insights about how much you're spending on things like food delivery, and it allows you to budget smarter and save more. But how about instead of juggling multiple apps to try to figure out all this stuff, like you can track all your spending and even make some long-term goals with their all-in-one convenience and easy collaboration. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com and the code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel, they're giving you the chance to get in on all the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's going to be cutting down the nets. So you can check out things like picking my favorites. Do you have your eye on any underdogs in this year's NCAA tournament? You're filling out your brackets. It's one of the things that my wife and I love to do every single year. Well, you can make it easy and go back and check the spreads, totals, game props with your favorites in this year's tournament. Stay in the action. The tournament games, they're happening almost every day, so there's always going to be something exciting to bet on. And the FanDuel app, you already know, it's easy, it's fast, it's simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Broncos Country, we're going to be talking about the perfect tight end to pair up with Evan Engram now that the Denver Broncos have made that big move on the offensive side of the ball in NFL free agency. So is Mason Taylor the guy, the LSU tight end? We're going to break down his game, why he's so perfect for this Denver Broncos team, and more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. But Broncos Country, I'll high salute to every single one of you. Thank you so much for joining in and listening in every single day. If you're an everyday listener out there, we appreciate you so much. And if you're not already an everyday listener, hey, go ahead, take a couple seconds, hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Become part of the growing community there as well. And Cody and I are going to be doing some mock draft Monday stuff with you all throughout the rest of this offseason leading up to the NFL draft. So do continue to submit your mock drafts to us. This is going to be our first go. I'm going to take the reins with this second round pick, Mason Taylor out of LSU. Look, I think this is a guy who fits perfectly with what the Denver Broncos currently need at the tight end position. Remember, we've got to think about just how dire things were in 2024 at this position group, right? I mean, obviously, for the Denver Broncos, it was 188 yards, led the position group. That was Adam Troutman last year. 19 receptions by Lucas Krull, led Broncos tight ends. 3 touchdowns from Nate Adkins, led the Broncos at the tight end position. So the productivity, it wasn't necessarily just a byproduct of, well, they're not really throwing the ball to the tight ends. They could have fed these guys a little bit more. That's not necessarily the case, right? I mean, these guys are not necessarily getting open consistently. They're not creating their offense, after the catch. And that's a problem when you don't have somebody that can be an offense creator at the tight end position in today's NFL. And that's really what the Joker is in Sean Payton's offense. It's a true elite receiving option at either running back or tight end. That's Sean Payton's definition, not mine. And these guys are capable of creating offense from anywhere on the field. It doesn't mean that, hey, Evan Engram is going to be lining up in the backfield all season long. That's not what it means to be the Joker. The Joker is a mismatched player who dictates coverage. And so you not only have a veteran who can fill that role now, but Mason Taylor is the guy that I think can fill that role going into the future. He's one of the youngest players in this year's draft at 20 years of age. He's going to be barely 21 at the start of this season. And an interesting nugget, I think, is very similarly last year, on day 2 of the 2024 NFL draft, the Broncos actually took a shot on one of the youngest players in last year's class, Jonah Ellis, another NFL legacy player who ended up having really strong contributions in his first NFL season with the team and expects obviously to have an even bigger role going forward. But what if Mason Taylor is sort of the 2025 version of that, right? Somebody that you take at a position where you've already made your big addition. You've already brought in Evan Engram. You've already told him he's going to be the Joker. He put out the tweet. He's already said, that he's going to play that role for this team. So what if you bring in a guy like Mason Taylor who can give you a secondary weapon at the position in the passing game, but then maybe take that position over when he's 22, 23 years old in just a couple of years? I mean, that's the type of developmental process the Broncos need to put into place, is having somebody like a Mason Taylor that can come in as an NFL legacy, because he is the son of former Miami Dolphins pass rusher Jason Taylor, who, I hate to say it, sadly beat out Champ Bailey for Defensive Player of the Year back in that 2006 season. But Jason Taylor obviously played for the Miami Dolphins for a really long time. He was there and had his Defensive Player of the Year season when Broncos general manager George Payton was actually the director of pro personnel there for the Miami Dolphins. So interesting connection that goes nearly 20 plus years almost at this point in terms of that deep connection that those guys have. And I'm sure the Broncos have been paying close attention to Mason Taylor, given his connections, because these are guys that we know love football, sons of coaches, sons of players. George Payton's very first draft pick for the Denver Broncos was Pat Surtain, who his dad also played for the Miami Dolphins back in the day. So the Broncos clearly like the former NFL player connections with these players that they're bringing in. It doesn't mean that every former NFL player's kid is going to get picked by the Broncos, but I do find this one to be a bit interesting. And because Mason Taylor is only 20, going on 21 years old this year, I believe that he has that perfect timing to be able to watch Evan Engram do what he does and then pick up that mantle while you're making plays in the meantime. So the first 3 picks of this Denver Broncos mock draft, to recap: first round, TreVeyon Henderson; second round, Mason Taylor; third round, we had Quinshon Judkins. So you get 2 running backs and a tight end in the first 3 rounds. And then for my 4th round pick, I went after Oregon defensive lineman Jamare Caldwell. The Broncos have a number of projected free agents on the defensive line in 2026. Right now, that would be Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, Malcolm Roach, pretty much the entire unit besides now DJ Jones, who got the big money extension. Jamare Caldwell is a 330, 340-pound guy who can move exceptionally well for his size, and he's somebody who would upgrade your run defense. He can be used in a variety of different alignments. One scouting report that I read said this guy's built like a traditional nose tackle, but actually gives you positional versatility on the defensive line. So he can line up over the center. He can line up over the guard. He can slide all over the place for you and give you a potential building block for the future, because we don't know who necessarily is going to be on the Denver Broncos roster next year other than DJ Jones on the defensive line. The 6th round picks that I made for the Denver Broncos in this particular mock draft: Mello Dotson, the cornerback out of Kansas, somebody whose stock might have fallen a little bit due to the combine, but look, ball skills, instincts, they're all there. George Payton, he always finds a way to draft at least one defensive back. So I would expect that to continue here in 2025. Also in the 6th round, picked up Jimmy Horn, the wide receiver out of Colorado. I feel like he's kind of an interesting player that stood out almost every time I watched Colorado last year, led that team in touchdown catches at one point. And so I feel like Jimmy Horn is the type of player who he's smaller, but he's fast. He's got good burst. He's got strong hands. He's got a good feel for the game. Maybe could contribute as a return specialist at some points as well. Love that potential pick. And then the final pick in the 6th round was Oklahoma State linebacker Nick Martin. Now, due to injuries, Nick Martin's stock seems to have fallen a little bit, at least if you look at the mock draft machines. Again, these aren't 100% accurate by any means or any stretch, but he did miss some time in 2024. In 2023, this guy at Oklahoma State had 140 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. He ran a 4.3 recently, or 4.53, excuse me, not a 4.3. Be careful by saying that. He ran a 4.53 at the scouting combine with a 38-inch vertical jump at the linebacker position. And so this is the type of guy that with those types of traits, you can expect him to contribute on special teams from day one. He gives you that versatility there and a potential developmental option, as we know. I mean, a lot of the best linebackers in today's NFL, they're kind of diamonds in the rough at one point or another. I mean, heck, even Dre Greenlaw, who just signed with the Broncos for 3 years, $35 million, he was a 5th-round pick at one point. And so it's just important to get these guys in the building. The Broncos have not drafted overly well at the off-ball linebacker position. So getting a guy in there who can be valuable depth for this team, especially after what we saw last season, I think would be important. So Broncos Country, you'll have to let me know what you think of those selections. Obviously headlined by the running backs, TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, with Mason Taylor thrown in there on the first 2 days of the draft. And then you get guys like Jamare Caldwell, Nick Martin, Mello Dotson, and Jimmy Horn Jr. on day 3. That could be a solid class for the Denver Broncos, who could they go defense much earlier than I have them going in this mock draft? I mean, the Broncos have a chance to potentially do whatever they want at pick number 20 overall. And another mock draft scenario that I recently went through had them doing exactly that, taking not just a defensive player, but a defensive back. Believe it or not, Broncos Country, I'm going to break down exactly why I made that decision coming up here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. We're jumping into the 4th quarter of today's Locked On Broncos show with mock draft in mind, right? There's a couple of mock drafts we're going through, mock drafts that I posted over there at predominantlyorange.com as well as NFLspinzone.com. And the big kind of crazy off the wall scenario that we're looking at here today is we looked at one already where the Broncos take 2 running backs with their top 3 picks. That would be pretty wild. But how about this? How about with their 1st-round pick, the Denver Broncos go defensive back? I'm going to tell you about exactly who I picked there, but I want to first say, Broncos Country, thanks so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. We really do appreciate you so much. It means the world to us to have your support, to have you locked in and tuning on every single day. Those of you that comment on YouTube or reach out to Cody and I on social media, like, we love you guys, and we appreciate you all so much for making the show exactly what it is. We get to do what we do because of you. So truly, sincerely, thank you so much. And I do pinch myself from time to time. Like, we get to talk about the NFL draft and we get to do this together every single day. This is so much fun. And it's one of the best parts about mock drafts is it's not like the NCAA tournament that we referenced earlier, right? The NCAA tournament, you might actually have a shot of, hey, you could predict the entire 1st round of the tournament accurately. Like, that, there's a chance that somebody will do that. The very low chance that somebody could predict an entire bracket, but there's less than even a fraction of a chance of somebody projecting the entire 1st round of the 2025 NFL draft accurately, or any individual draft class. You can go throughout history. Some of the best mock drafts ever made are less than 50% accurate. And so it's not about accuracy with NFL mock drafts. It's about scenarios, right? And what about the possibility of a first-round defensive back. Specifically, I did this mock draft over at NFLSpinZone.com. I had the Denver Broncos taking Jahdae Barron from Texas, a versatile defensive back who's played a little safety. He's played a little, big star linebacker in the dime alignment. He's played the slot. He's played outside corner. That versatility is really going to appeal to a lot of NFL teams, and it's probably a big reason why Barron is actually the number one cornerback on Daniel Jeremiah's board right now, and he's one of the top 10 overall players according to DJ. And if that is the case, and for whatever reason he gets driven down the board to pick number 20 overall, I think the Broncos would have to have a serious conversation about, okay, does this guy fit anywhere in our scheme? Because really, we could justify and say we're not necessarily going to pay Jaquan McMillan going forward, or maybe they view Riley Moss as a better long-term fit in the slot, or maybe they just straight up want an upgrade at slot corner. Whatever the case may be, I find it very interesting that Vance Joseph's cousin is the pass game coordinator defensively for Texas. In fact, he's also the defensive backs coach. That is a really unique connection when you're talking about drafting somebody in the first round. And basically, you're talking about getting detective level intel on all of these players, right? You're going to their hometown. I remember a story where the Broncos, they went and found out from Javonte Williams' barber, like what kind of a guy Javonte is. You're getting as much background and doing as much digging as possible on these players because you're drafting the person as much as what you see this guy doing on tape. Like, you can draft guys for what they do on tape all day long. Are you drafting a true culture fit for your team? Are you drafting somebody that you know well? Jahdae Barron is somebody that when you watch him play and when you hear people talk about him, you know that this guy loves football and he shrinks the field for opposing offenses. So is there a potential chance that the Broncos could draft this guy if he's sitting there at number 20 overall? I think right now, and I'm just spitballing here, so spitball with me. What if the Broncos could pretty much do whatever they want outside of quarterback in the first round of the NFL draft? I mean, obviously you're not taking kickers unless you're the Raiders, right? Which that actually happened, by the way. 2000 NFL draft, Sebastian Janikowski, go look it up. You're not taking kickers in the first round. You're not taking punters. You're not taking long snappers. And I think the Broncos are good at quarterback right now. So could really anything else be on the board? Like, offensive line, you could justify it. I mean, wide receiver, absolutely. Running back, absolutely. Tight end, go for it. D-line, go for it. Off-ball linebacker, yes. If the edge guy even is the right player and the best player on the board there, I would say, hey, you might want to go cost effective at that position and in the future there and save money. Who knows? But I don't know that anything other than quarterback and the specialists is off the table for the Denver Broncos in round one, especially when it comes to you made a concerted effort in NFL free agency to upgrade what was already the third best defense in the NFL. And yes, those were necessary upgrades because we saw the Broncos break down at the end of the year. They finished as the third ranked defense because, well, they were the first ranked defense, and the last 5 games really tanked their overall rankings in a number of ways. Adding another defensive back, a playmaker who is physical, who goes after the football, who can create turnovers, who can take advantage of your pass rush, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. Now, who does he replace? Does he replace Riley Moss? Does he replace Jaquan McMillan? Is he, kind of just a rotational guy at the beginning and you kind of wait and see down the line? I think anything is on the table, but do you feel like the Broncos are really in a best player available sort of spot right now? I think they are because of the way that the rest of this draft is. Now, we're not filling out a crossword puzzle here with the offseason, right? We're not filling out a Sudoku puzzle. This is very much so you'll get to the different things when you get to them. You're almost playing a couple of different games here, especially when it comes to the draft, because what's the strength of this year's draft class? When you hear about it from people who have studied every player, the strength is the running back position. Now, does that mean that you pass on a running back that you love in round one just because, well, everybody says running back is deep? No, you don't necessarily do that, but does it give you maybe a little bit more freedom when you're sitting there in round one to say, we like TreVeyon Henderson, but we also really like RJ Harvey, or we like the kid from Kansas State, or we like the kid from Kansas, Devin Neal. There's so many different backs in this class that could convince you to say, we're going to go after a position that might cost us more down the line. Where the Broncos right now have defensive linemen, like I said, and they could draft a D lineman in round 1 because they have Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, and Malcolm Roach all slated to hit free agency next year. They might not want to pay all those guys. They might want to allocate free agency funds elsewhere. And so it's just interesting to think about, when it comes to defensive back. You just paid Pat Surtain, you paid your safeties the last couple of years, and you're getting close to having to pay Jaquan McMillan as well. And if Riley Moss continues to progress, you don't want to put the cart before the horse too much when it comes to this type of stuff. But at the same time, I do believe you consider every option, especially with the connection that Vance Joseph has with his cousin coaching DBs there at Texas. I think you're going to get really good intel on this player, and you're going to be able to make a very, very educated decision on, hey, we want this guy to come not only be part of our roster, but to be part of our team culture. So huge advantage there. Might be an advantage for other Longhorns players as well, Broncos country, in case you have those guys tabbed up on your mock draft boards right now. But again, let us know your thoughts. We want to hear from you. We're going to compile mock drafts. Maybe we'll mention a bunch of them on our next mock draft episode, things like that. But Broncos country, we appreciate you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Let me know what you thought of these mock draft picks. Let me know what you think of the idea of Jediah Barron in round 1 and that connection to Vance Joseph. Obviously, very, very interesting and kind of thickens the plot a little bit. But for your second listen today, don't forget to check out Locked On NFL Draft, because if you're like me, you want to get excited about some of these prospects. You want to listen to the people who know a lot about them. So go listen to the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, where you can find out more about these players who could eventually become Denver Broncos. Broncos country, we'll catch you on tomorrow's episode. We'll be talking about a free agency recap. Cody Roark and myself will be back for you with another episode of the show. But until then, we'll see you. Have a good one.